It was autumn, and though it was only 10 p.m., not even full night yet, an impenetrable darkness had already swallowed the land, locking everything in its grip until dawn. This place had always felt enchanted to me, especially as a child when I'd come here to visit my grandmother. In her evening stories, the forest was home to mischievous spirits, eerie creatures, and enchanted homes. As dusk set in, her tales would breathe life into the mysterious world around us. The spirits and creatures were never truly evil, just playful in an unsettling way, lingering in the shadows until morning. Often, I dreamed that I was part of that strange world myself. Those were the days of wonder, when no one judged you for crying in public, and friendships could be made or broken over something as simple as a piece of candy. Good times. But now, here I was, looking around at this old house once full of life, now overrun by insects and mould. It was dying, its decay spreading as if some illness had gripped the entire village. Most of the houses here were empty shells. Only a few dim lights glowed in the windows, but it was nothing like before when at least 20 houses were fully alive. I sat surrounded by the ruins of the past. Fixing up the house might seem easy enough, just invest a bit here and there. But tonight I sat sipping tea, knowing it wasn't worth it. This would likely be my last visit here. No point in prolonging the agony. The village was dying, and with it everything else, memories, homes, places. The house was reaching the end of its time. It was best to let it go. All that happened here would live on in my mind. The house, my grandparents, the friends and neighbours from those old days. They wouldn't die, not as long as I remembered. They'd stay young, free-spirited, and full of life, as long as I was here to recall them. Taking a sip of coffee, I thought about how strange it felt at only 32 years old to be mourning ruins like this. I tried to turn my thoughts to something else like work, but it didn't work. Work was far away, in the city. Just then, I had a sudden urge to lose myself in that magic again, to let my mind drift into the fairy tales I once knew. I had an idea, remembering the old bridge. How could I have forgotten? Tonight I would go see it, just needed to focus and remember the details of the stories my grandfather used to tell me. The memory of his tales flooded back like a river breaking its banks. That bridge was a mystery to everyone, a link to some hidden world. It's no ordinary bridge, my grandfather would say. Why, even the devil himself crossed it once. It was ancient, as though it had always been there, its weathered wood creaking but never breaking, strong enough to withstand the seasons, yet untouched and unrepairable. At night, people would see shadows on it, figures that didn't belong to this world. My grandfather warned me, don't linger at the bridge, especially at night, and certainly not on full moon or on certain mystical nights. Some say if you cross it on those nights, you might find yourself somewhere else entirely. The stories of people disappearing on that bridge played in my mind. This night, I felt an urge to see if it was all true, an urge that wouldn't leave me alone. At midnight, I finally gathered myself. I threw on my raincoat, grabbed a flashlight and a small bag, and set off toward the bridge. The night was deep and quiet, the smell of damp earth and rotting leaves thick in the air. The village was deathly silent. Only a few lights flickered in windows here and there, giving the place a feeling of holding its breath. I finally reached the bridge. Standing at the bridge, I examined the old moss-covered boards, worn and weathered. I picked up a small stone from the path and slipped it into my pocket, just as my grandfather had described. A strange sense of anticipation washed over me, a mix of excitement and fear. Though I doubted anything would happen, something told me that tonight was different. With a deep breath, I took the first steps onto the bridge. Each step seemed to echo, a faint creak underfoot. As I reached the middle, I thought I saw a shadow moving toward me, but it vanished as soon as I focused on it. I continued across, feeling a pang of disappointment when nothing seemed to happen. Reaching the other side, I tossed the stone into the water and turned back. But as I walked back into the village, something felt off. I noticed a faint smell of smoke in the air. Heart pounding, I picked up my pace, making my way up the hill to get a view of the village. What I saw chilled me. The village looked different. There were more houses, lights in every window, and a heavy smoke was drifting from one of the chimneys. The air was thick, suffused with a strange, unsettling odour. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but as I moved closer I realised I'd stepped into another world. Standing on the hill, I looked out at the transformed village, my heart racing. Everything looked familiar, yet layered with something eerie, almost unnatural. The streets were wider, the houses sturdier, as if strengthened by some dark force. Gathering my nerve, I decided to get a closer look. The street was empty, the silence so deep it felt unnatural, like the village itself was waiting. I passed a few houses, then saw a faint light in one of them. Gathering my courage, I knocked on the door. After a long pause I heard footsteps, and finally the door opened to reveal a thin, pale-faced man. "Matthew," he whispered, and I nodded, too surprised to speak. "Come in, but quietly." "Things are different here," he said, glancing around as though afraid of being overheard. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of damp and decay. The room was almost empty, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. The man, his wife and son looked worn, their faces pale and haunted. "You're from the other side, right?" he asked quietly. I nodded again, and he continued, "This bridge, it doesn't work the way you think. It traps people, keeps them here. The only one who can cross back and forth freely is the warden. He's a sorcerer. We're stuck here, enslaved by some spell we can't break, and anyone who tries to leave will never find their way back. He warned me to head back to the bridge before sunrise if I hope to return to my world. If you're still here after dawn, you'll be trapped like us," he said, casting a nervous glance over his shoulder. I thanked him and slipped out as quietly as I could. Now I had only one goal, to get back to the bridge and cross it before it was too late. On my way, I heard footsteps behind me, and when I turned, I saw an old man cloaked in shadow, his gaze piercing and heavy. He raised a gnarled staff and said, "You think you can leave? The bridge doesn't let souls go that easily." But I clutched the stone in my pocket and dashed toward the bridge. Step by step I crossed it, not daring to look back. Reaching the other side, I turned to see only an empty road. The strange scent of smoke was gone, and dawn was beginning to break. Everything was back to normal. When I returned to the house, my grandfather was waiting. I told him everything, and he nodded thoughtfully as if he already knew. "Not everyone makes it back," he murmured. "That memory, Matthew, keep it close. Only those who remember can keep the borders between worlds." I nodded, realizing that night had changed me forever. Please write in the comments, support the video with a like, click the subscribe button. It's not difficult for you and I will be pleased. You can also share this video with your friends. They will probably also be interested.